Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents You're Not Safe by Mary Burton, narrated by Brian Troxell.
Prologue. The Hill Country, Texas. Monday, June 2, 1 a.m. A hangover punched and pounded Rory Edwards' brain as he woke to discover a hangman's noose coiling around his neck. His hands lashed behind his back, his booted feet were braced on an open truck tailgate. He shifted, tried to wiggle free, but hemp dug painfully deep into an already blood-stained neck and wrists. What the hell? He blinked grit and film from his blurred gaze as he glanced up the thick rope meandering over a distant tree branch and snaking down the gnarled bark to a square knot at the trunk. Shit. He'd done a lot of stupid things in his life, but what had he done to land here? Panic rising, he scanned the area, illuminated by the full moon, to find dense shrubs and trees and a patch of dirt too rough to be considered a road. He didn't recognize his surroundings, but a lonely, isolated feeling banded around his chest. Wherever he was, it was far from another human. Texas had hundreds of thousands of bleak acres where a man could die and never be found. A coyote howled in the distance. Dread kicked and scratched his insides. Shit! He struggled to free his hands, but when they refused to budge, he couldn't silence his fears. Help! He shouted his plea over and over until his throat burned inside and out. No one came. Breathless, he craned his neck, trying to better identify his surroundings, but as he leaned forward, his foothold slipped, and he nearly skidded off the tailgate's edge. Every muscle in his body tensed as he scrambled and threw his weight back until he was on firm footing. He was hyperventilating now, and minutes passed before he calmed enough to think. This time his gaze roamed wildly and landed on a picture nailed to the hanging tree. It was an old picture, crumpled, tattered, and faded. Recognition flickered instantly. He'd carried the picture in his wallet for a dozen years, and he'd cherished it. More nights than he could count, he'd stared at that picture, asking for strength, when life shit-kicked him in the gut. Tears filled his eyes. The aging image captured a grinning teenage Rory, tall, straight, and broad-shouldered. His thick, sun-kissed hair skimmed piercing blue eyes. Tanned skin accentuated a crooked, melting grin. His arm wrapped around the shoulders of a petite, young blonde girl. She was pretty, not overly stunning like Rory, but her smile could be electric. At first glance, Rory's embrace around the girl appeared casual and playful. Two young teenagers in love. However, closer inspection exposed a wrinkle of tension creasing Rory's forehead and the pointed edge of desperation behind his gaze. The young Rory held the girl a little too close and a little too anxiously. On that long-ago day, he'd been so worried about himself and his immense burdens. He'd never bothered to look past the girl's forced smiles. Not once had he asked about her feelings. Not once. If he had really noticed her, he'd have seen she hadn't been happy. Yes, she smiled, but her full lips often thinned into a strained line, and her blue eyes reflected the weight of her own demons. She clutched his shirt as if knowing one drowning swimmer couldn't save another. If he'd been a little less selfish, he would have seen her sadness. Instead of whispering empty compliments in her ear or kissing her when she needed to talk, he could have soothed her wounds. He could have done so much for her. But he didn't. Twin weights of regret and failure settled on his shoulders as he begged for her help one last time. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Save me. Just one more time, please. Don't let me die. Save me. Laughter crept out of the darkness and rumbled behind him. How many times is Elizabeth supposed to save you, Rory? The deep, clear voice made him bristle. Don't you think Elizabeth deserves a break from your incessant whining? Shocked by the voice, Rory twisted his bound hands against the tight rope. "Who are you?" Silence. "Why are you doing this?" Laughter. In his peripheral vision, a strike and a flash of flame cut the shadows as the stranger lifted a match to a cigarette's tip. Rory craned his neck, trying to see the stranger's face, but the ropes cut and burned until he stilled. The smoke's acrid scent wandered out from the shadows. "Who are you?" As if he hadn't spoken, the voice said, "How many days of sobriety did you wipe out last night? 205 or 6? 206 days of sobriety had bolstered his confidence and plumped up his pride. He believed he'd never go back. And yet he had tossed away those months so easily. He stared at the sparse land as barren as his promises to get clean and sober. Shit. Why had he been so reckless? The demons, which had stalked him for many, many years, murmured familiar words. Loser, stupid, failure. Shit. He thought he'd licked the drinking. Pooling tears spilled down his cheeks. Loser, stupid, failure. The words beckoned him to step off the tailgate and let the rope end his suffering. Who would notice? Who would care? Likely no one. And still he clung to life. "I don't want to die. Whatever I've done to you, I'll fix it. I'll make it right." "How are you going to fix it?" "I don't know." The stranger chuckled. "Don't you see? The true fix is death." Rory swallowed. His throat burned. "It's not too late. It's not. I can make amends and fix what I've done. I have a brother who has money. He'll make it right. Just tell me what you need." The stranger moved out of the shadows toward the tree, giving Rory a glimpse of a red ball cap and a heavy blue jacket obscuring a lean frame. His tormentor tossed his cigarette on the ground, and summer grass, dried from drought, crackled under his feet as he ground out the embers. Rory cut his vision to the left toward his tormentor, who remained just out of sight. "Come on, man!" Pure desperation emphasized the words. "I can make it right." "You can kid yourself, but you can't fool us, Rory. You'll never get it right. It's not in your DNA." His slight body trembled, and he pissed on himself. "What the fuck do you want?" "We don't want to hurt you, Rory. We want to end your suffering." "I'm not suffering." He managed the strange smile of prey facing predator. "I'm living my life as best I can." "It's a sad, miserable life, Rory." His wrists strained against the unbreakable bindings. "But it's mine, and I've a right to live it. I'll get back on the wagon. Start over." "I know you're scared." The stranger's voice gentled. "I know you don't have the courage to see this through. Look at that picture, Rory. Even then, when your chances were at their best, you clung to young Elizabeth, who could barely take care of herself." "I don't want to die." "Do you really think Elizabeth would think your life is worth saving, Rory?" "Elizabeth was kind and gentle. She'd want me to live." "Really? You hurt her badly. Disappointed her when she needed you most. And then you proceeded to screw up all the good works your family did for you. You've been in one crap job after another for the last decade, and you managed to piss away 206 days of sobriety in one night. You talk of your brother, but in recent years he's refused all your calls." Rory had burned at the last bridge with his brother last year when he'd missed their mother's funeral. "I've never claimed to be a straight arrow." "It's as if you feel you don't deserve any bit of happiness." He'd never wanted to be a suit like his brother or be jailed by the family business. "I like happiness just fine. I have fun all the time." "Where do you think your trouble began, Rory? When did your life go off the rails?" The stranger's voice was soft but clear, and a little familiar now. Rory rummaged through his memory, trying to isolate the voice. When had they crossed paths? He'd been in that bar in East Austin last night. He had a lead on a job and had not wanted to go inside, but the promise of work had been too tempting. Who? Just because I'm not a choir boy doesn't mean I'm bad. A click of a lighter and then more smoke from a fresh cigarette. I think you were done the day you were born, Rory. I think you could never hold a candle to your brother. He's the one your parents loved. He's the one who got all the attention and support. The stranger's blistering truth rekindled the old anger that had chased him toward reckless choices, gotten him kicked out of a string of private schools, and thrown into too many jails. Did my brother send you to do this? I know he's wanted me gone for a long time. Face it, it's time you left this world for the next. Panic extinguished the anger. That's not true. Of course it's true. The stranger's voice remained soft, steady, and so reasonable. You were the mistake, the child no one wanted. Sad your own parents wouldn't want their own flesh and blood. Rory tipped his face up away from the picture and toward the moonless sky. Stop. It's not good to bury the pain, Rory. Better to face it head on and deal with it. Admit it, your parents didn't want you. Tears stung his eyes. He was 31, could hotwire a car, crack any lock, and hold a gallon of liquor in his belly and still walk straight. He'd grown a thick skin, but the stranger's words stripped away the gristle and left him feeling like the sad, pathetic kid he'd been. Not true. Come on, Rory. It's come to Jesus time. The moment of truth. The pain had burrowed deep inside you, and though it does a good job of hiding behind a bottle, it's there. Rory stared at Elizabeth's face. He fisted his fingers. Who sent you? We weren't sent, Rory. We were summoned by you. What the hell does that mean? You called us. Your pain and suffering beckoned us to find you. I'm only here to take the pain away. Rory twisted his head toward the stranger and stumbled on the truck's tailgate. Heels skidded up to the edge. Heart racing, he shouted, I don't want you to take the pain away. I like my life. How long has it been since you've seen Elizabeth? How do you know Elizabeth? I know all about her. Even now, hearing her name and staring into her and her lackluster blue eyes soothed him. She told me she loved me. And I believe she did. She was willing to go to the mat for you, and you sent all her letters back unread. More tears spilled. I didn't want to send them back. I loved her. Our deeds define us, Rory, not our words. Rory tensed, shocked a stranger would know deep and intimate details. How do you know so much about me? I know a lot about you, and Elizabeth, and the others. I know all your deepest desires. You don't. You once said you'd die a happy man if the last face you saw were Elizabeth's. Isn't that right? Go to hell, Rory spat. I'm here to grant that last wish. No one should go to their grave without getting their last wish granted. The stranger ground out his cigarette and opened the truck cab door. His body scraped across cloth seats before the cab door slammed closed. He turned on the engine and revved it. Rory braced. His gaze bore into Elizabeth's smiling face. In these last moments, he ignored her tension and saw only her smile, her smooth skin, and her blonde hair, swept recklessly over her right shoulder. In these last seconds, he transported back to the night by the campfire. She'd raced to the fire laughing, and seconds before the image had been snapped, she'd nestled close. He'd hugged her tighter and attributed her tensing muscles to the evening chill. Rory gritted his teeth and fisted his hands. He straightened. He'd die like a man for her. "I love you, Elizabeth." The truck engine roared, and the bed moved slowly away from the tree. Even knowing he couldn't escape his bindings, he struggled to free his hands and dig his boots into the rusted tailgate. His bindings clamped hard on raw wrists, and his feet slid to the tailgate's edge. Seconds ticked like hours as the last inches of metal skimmed the bottom of his boots, and his body fell with a hard jolt. The noose jerked tight and sliced into his skin. Pain burned through him. His struggles tightened the rope's grip, crushing his windpipe as his feet dangled inches above the ground. He gasped for air, but his lungs didn't fill. He dangled, kicked. The rope cut deeper. He was vaguely aware the truck had stopped. The scent of another cigarette reached him. The driver had stopped to have a smoke and watch him dangle. Staying to enjoy the show. And then his brain spun, spittle drooled from his mouth. As the blackness bled in from the corners of his vision, he stared at Elizabeth. "I love you." His grip on life slipped away. "Unbind his hands." Her voice had a shrill quality that made Jackson cringe. Out of spite, he ignored her and continued to stare at Rory's dangling lifeless body. Head tilted to the right. Eyes stared sightless at the sky. Tongue dangled out of his mouth. "Unbind his hands," she demanded. He sighed. "Why?" "Tied hands mean murder, and this is supposed to be a suicide." He hated to admit it, but she was right. Damn her. She was always right. She could be annoying that way, always so sure in what needed to be done, and so judgmental when he didn't listen. "Do it!" she ordered. He stiffened, not sparing her a glance. He couldn't bear to look at her smug, smiling face. One day he'd be rid of her. One day he'd be free. He pulled the switchblade from his back pocket. He kept his voice steady, choosing to keep the peace for now. "You're always good with the details." "Which is exactly why you will always need me." Chapter 1. Monday, June 2, 8 a.m. Fatigue-fueled impatience burrowing under Ranger Tec Bragg's skin as he pressed his booted foot against the accelerator of his black SUV, barreling along the rocky rural route cutting into the Texas hill country. Scrubby trees and low-lying shrubs bordered the road brushed with bone-dry dirt. A handful of plump clouds floated in a blue sky and teased a good soaking rain to ease the year-long drought. Bragg could hope and wish the rains didn't destroy his crime scene, but he didn't bother. Life had taught him his wants and needs didn't mean shit to the universe. Whether the rains came or not, he'd deal. Flashing blue lights of half a dozen police cars and media vans told him he'd found his crime scene. He drove past them all until he reached the Texas Department of Public Safety officer manning the entrance to the crime scene. He slowed, unrolled his window as the uniformed officer approached, and touched the brim of his white hat. "Morning. Ranger Tec Bragg. Heard I'm needed." The officer touched the brim of his trooper's hat. "Yes, sir, Sergeant Bragg. Follow this dirt road a half a mile and you'll see the crime scene. No missing it. Sheriff is waiting for you." "Appreciate it." "Glad to have you back, Sergeant Bragg," the grinning officer said. "Heard about what you did on the border." Bragg's mood soured. Fame didn't fit him well. "Right." The road led him toward a new cluster of cars from the local sheriff's department. He'd received a call just after dawn from the local sheriff requesting a visit on an apparent suicide. The dead man, the sheriff drawled, had an older brother richer than Midas who claimed the governor as a friend. Sheriff wanted a ranger on site for possible damage control. Shit. His recent promotion, touted as a reward for his work on the border, required deeds he hated more than the cartels or the coyotes. Hand-holding, meetings, press briefings. He'd landed smack in the middle of a politicking world he'd carefully avoided for years. Since he was 16, Bragg had gone his own way and learned it was best kept to himself. He didn't rely on anyone and was careful to make sure no one relied on him. His leather boots crunched against the dry earth as he took long, impatient strides toward the scene. He wore a starched white shirt that itched, string tie, and creased khakis. His Sig Sauer gun hung on his right hip, and on his left side rested his cell and cuffs. He sported a newly polished, albeit well-worn, Texas Ranger star on his chest. Despite the heat, he resisted the urge to roll up his shirt sleeves as he nodded to more deputies, all curious about the suicide garnering a Texas Ranger the likes of Tec Bragg. He made his way toward the yellow crime scene tape. Ahead, he spotted County Sheriff Jake Wheeler. Tall and broad-shouldered, Wheeler wore his brown uniform, cowboy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that covered a thick shock of white hair. The sun had etched deep lines in his tanned face. A belly rounded over the edge of a non-regulation thick silver belt buckle engraved with his initials. In his late 50s, Wheeler had been a sheriff for 20 years, but now faced a tough re-election next year. Though he didn't fit the image of a politician, Wheeler was well practiced at avoiding controversy. Wheeler wanted to pawn off an explosive case. The morning heat had already darkened Wheeler's shirt with sweat. "Ranger Bragg?" Bragg extended his hand to Sheriff Wheeler. "Morning, Sheriff. Thanks for coming, Bragg. I think we might have an issue." Bragg glanced beyond Wheeler and the ring of officers surrounding the yellow tape to the crime scene. It wasn't hard to miss the body. It hung from a tree. A couple of hours, let alone a couple of days, in the Texas sun played havoc with the dead. The intense temperature triggered bloating and skin slippage within hours, and the decomposition process drew black flies, which already buzzed. "By the looks, he's not been out here long. I'm guessing not more than 6 hours. This time tomorrow he'll be one hell of a mess." "I hear you found his wallet." "We surely did. It was at the base of the tree. If there'd been no wallet, I'm not sure how easy it would have been to identify him." Bragg glanced toward the tree and saw the forensic technician's yellow numbered marker by the wallet. "Left it out so there'd be no missing it." Wheeler hooked his thumbs in his belt buckle. "Someone wanted it found." Bragg rested his hands on his hips. "I didn't catch the victim's name. Didn't want to say it over the radio until we were absolutely sure. Never know. Wallet might not belong to the dead guy." "Whose name on the wallet?" "Rory Edwards." "Edwards?" "The oil family." David Edwards was indeed a heavy hitter in Texas politics and explained Bragg's summons. "One and the same. Rory listed his brother's fancy West Austin address on his driver's license." "Old man was a wildcatter who struck it rich. Family has more money than God. Father died years back, as I recall." "He did. Mother died last year, but older brother still owns the family home. Controls the family business and has his eye on the governor's office." As Bragg moved closer, the buzz of black flies mingled with the growing stench of death and decay. "You think this is Rory?" "Not 100% sure. This guy doesn't look like his picture so much." "Hell of a way to start the week." A faint smile lifted the edge of Wheeler's mouth. "Yeah." "You wouldn't just call me in for a suicide, Jake. I know you've an election coming next spring, but a suicide is fairly straightforward." Wheeler's brow knitted. "Look at the crime scene." Bragg let his gaze roam the site. First off, he noticed there was no discarded chair, step stool, or ladder near the body. Shifting his focus to the tree, He noted the rope snaked up from the dead man's body, up and over a branch into the base of the tree where it was securely tied. It wouldn't have been an easy climb up the tree and out to the branch dragging a rope, but a motivated man could do it. Still, if Edwards had jumped from that height, he'd not only have broken his neck, but the velocity of the fall, combined with the body's weight, would have left a deep gash in the neck, or worse, decapitated it. This wasn't a suicide. Who found the body? Surveyors. A vineyard owner recently purchased the land and plans to clear it and plant more vines. The surveyors were out here early just after dawn to beat the heat. They smelled him before they saw him. The buzzing of the flies drew their gazes up. They called it in. Surveyors check out? They did. Work for a local firm. I know both of them. They were pretty rattled, so I let them go on. If you need them later, I'll get you their numbers. What vineyard hired them? Wheeler cleared his throat. Didn't catch the name. Find out. Bragg rested his hands on his hips, studying the dead man's boots, which were custom-made and would have set him back several $1,000s. Fancy boots jived with the fancy address on the license. Want a closer look? Wheeler said, offering plastic gloves. Sure do. Bragg accepted the gloves and ducked under the crime scene tape and waited for the tech to log him into the site. He nodded to the forensics technicians as he glanced around the area surrounding the body. Didn't take more than a second to see the tire tracks. He knelt and studied the imprint. Judging by the depth of the tracks, the truck had backed up to the site under the body and then driven straight back out. Bragg's gaze trailed the tracks down the dirt road cutting through the brush and leading back to the rural route. Rory might have driven a truck in here, but he didn't drive it out. I'm thinking he had a little help. Bragg rose, stretching his limbs. Too little sleep in the last months had left him stiff. I'd bet Mr. Edwards stood on the flatbed of the truck when it pulled out. And then he dropped and strangled to death. Wheeler nodded. Forensics also bagged 2 cigarette butts. DNA will tell us if it belonged to the victim. They might find Edwards's DNA on one or both butts, but Bragg's gut said no. I'm guessing it was the second person at the scene. Someone else was here and lingered to watch Mr. Edwards die. Wheeler rubbed the back of his neck with his hand. Edwards had a history of trouble. Drugs, drinking. Had a car accident in my county years back, and the family paid off the guy he hit. Problem went away. Heard similar tales of other such problems. He could have pushed the wrong person too far. Maybe. The dead man's hands dangled at his side. Blood, no longer pumped by the heart, had settled in his fingers, leaving them dark as if bruised. The nighttime heat, which had reached the low 90s, had also accelerated decomposition, causing the skin on his hands to loosen. I've seen murders like this before along the border. Cartels leave their victims out for all to see. Don't see hangings as much as beheadings or shootings. And you sure don't see folks from a family like the Edwardses getting strung up much. Bragg noted the red rope bracelet on Rory's right wrist. It appeared homemade. Have you called the family? Not yet. Figured I'd run it by you first. Didn't want to stir a hornet's nest if I didn't have to. And being up for re-election, Wheeler wanted Bragg to do the stirring. When will they be ready to cut him loose? He's good to go now. We were waiting for you. Bragg nodded, knowing his day had changed from meetings to fieldwork. He couldn't say he was sorry. Go ahead and cut him down. Wheeler nodded to the officer by the tree, and both watched as the uniformed officer raised a saw blade to the rope. While 2 other deputies grabbed hold of the rope, the first officer cut. In a matter of minutes, the hemp frayed and then finally gave way. The officers dug their booted feet into the ground, supporting the body's dead weight. While a forensic tech snapped pictures, the officers slowly lowered the body to the ground. Stiff with rigor mortis, it stood, unbending. As the rope slackened, another gloved tech took the body by the shoulders and eased it to the ground. More pictures were snapped as flies buzzed and swarmed. Bragg walked over to the body and studied the man's half-open eyes and bloated face. He had grown accustomed to the foul smells of death. The gangs and cartels that moved in and out of the border traded in death as easily as dollars. Whereas the younger cops around him now had paled and taken a step back, he knelt and studied the victim. He'd built a reputation tackling dirty jobs. Rope burns ringed the victim's wrists. "Why bind his hands and then cut him loose?" he said, more to himself. "Maybe the killer thought we'd be fooled by the suicide scenario," Wheeler offered. "If the rains had come as the weather guys had said, those tire tracks would have been washed away, and a few more days out here and those wrist marks would have been gone." Maybe. Bragg glanced beyond the scene to the rugged brush and scrub trees around him. "What's around this immediate area?" "Immediate area? Not much. Brush and scrub. But like I said, on the adjacent land there is a vineyard. It's small and family-owned. Been around for 20-plus years." Bragg studied the dead man's brown and rotted teeth. He lifted the victim's jean jacket and searched for any signs of trauma, bits of paper, stains, anything to offer clues about the man. He found a receipt in the front shirt pocket for Tate's Bar. In his pants pocket, he found 2 rumpled dollar bills, a room key, a couple of wrapped peppermints, and a half-dozen sobriety chips. Guy has nothing on him worth taking. He sure pissed off someone. That he did. Bragg rose and glanced back at the tree. Immediately he spotted the photo flapping in the slight breeze. He moved toward the picture featuring a young teenage couple. Both kids had the look of money. She wore pearl earrings and a gold chain around her neck, and he wore a white-collared shirt flipped up. His hair was thick and blonde, as if he spent a lot of time in the sun. Bragg leaned in and studied the boy's smooth, hairless face. If he wasn't mistaken, the boy was his victim. "Did you see this?" Wheeler frowned and moved toward the tree. "Yeah, looks like the victim in the picture, but the image is old." "Who's the girl?" "Don't recognize her. Teen crush, maybe?" Bragg pulled out his cell phone, snapped a picture of the image, and then leaned in to study the young girl's face. She smiled, but it wasn't joyful. Wherever she'd been when the picture was taken, she didn't want to be there. Rory, on the other hand, appeared happy. His posture was relaxed and his smile full and genuine. "Picture's here for a reason." He lingered on the girl's image a beat longer and then slid the phone back in its belt cradle. "We need to identify that girl." "It's about a decade old, judging by the victim's appearance." "We need to find out what he was doing 10 years ago. We know he didn't kill himself, so whoever strung him up put this picture here for a reason." Wheeler nodded. "You think she killed him?" He studied the girl's strained smile. "She'd not be the first woman to track someone from her past and kill him." Bragg glanced toward the ground at the wallet lying beside the evidence marker. He knelt, pulled a pen from his pocket, and opened the wallet to find a couple of dollars, no credit cards, and an expired Texas driver's license. "Ranger Bragg?" The summons came from the forensic technician. Melinda Ashburn, if he remembered correctly, was in her late 20s and wore her red hair back in a tight ponytail. Freckles sprinkled her nose. He moved toward her. "Yes, ma'am?" "The medical examiner can move the body any time now. I've shot all the pictures I need, and I've made detailed sketches of the scene. Given the heat, it's better if we get the victim out of the sun." Behind her, the medical examiner's technicians stood ready with a stretcher and a black body bag. "Go on ahead and take him. I've seen what I need. Though I'd like a set of those photos you took sent to me." "Sure, will do." Often after the confusion of the day, he'd sit in his home study and go over crime scene prints. The camera lens frequently captured what the eye missed during the chaos. Bragg arrived at the medical examiner's office an hour after the body. He'd been delayed at the scene by the media who'd wanted a statement. While Wheeler spoke, he'd stood quietly off to the side. Now, the building's cool air greeted him and offered welcome relief from the heat radiating from the asphalt parking lot. The temperature gauge in his car had hit 105 degrees, and he bet it would rise higher by mid-afternoon. Waiting for him at the end of the hallway was a tall, long-legged ranger who now leaned casually against the wall as he checked his phone for texts. On the way in, Bragg had called in Ranger Brody Winchester. The two had worked together years ago in Houston. Bragg had transferred from El Paso 2 months ago, and seeing as he'd dealt with enough changes in his life recently, he liked the idea of working with someone familiar. Winchester had recently married Dr. Joe Granger, a psychologist who worked from time to time with the Rangers. Rumor had it the two had been married in college, but it wasn't Bragg's style to poke into another man's personal business. Lord knows he had his share of personal crap he didn't discuss. Winchester pushed away from the wall and tucked his phone in its hip cradle. "Once I heard from you, I called ahead and let the medical examiner know we were coming." He extended his hand. "Told them to clear the decks." Bragg's iron grip matched Winchester's. "Good. I want answers before I visit with the family." Bragg and Winchester showed their badges to the officer at the front desk, and then headed to the bank of elevators. "I pulled the victim's rap sheet like you requested. Sheriff Wheeler was right. Rory Edwards has been in trouble since he could drive. Family's been cleaning up his messes for years." Bragg hit the down button, thinking his own old man had never eased his trouble, but had been the source of his burdens. The old bastard had been a worthless drunk who'd used Bragg and his older sister Sue as punching bags. Sue had left home at 17. He'd been 14 and figured she'd send for him when she settled. But she'd found herself a man within months and married. "Sorry, Tec. I just can't take you with me. I got a chance to be happy and need to take it. You'll find your chance one day." Sue had sent him a Christmas card the next year and told him she'd had a son, Mitch, but that had been the last he'd received word from her until 3 years ago, when an officer in Houston had notified him she'd died of an overdose. The husband, who'd never legally married Sue, had been long gone, and the boy, Mitch, pissed as hell, had enlisted in the Marines. Mitch had returned to Austin 2 months ago, recovering from wounds both visible and invisible from his tour in Iraq. Bragg would later learn the Humvee Mitch had been driving had been hit by a roadside bomb, which had all but obliterated the vehicle. There'd been 4 soldiers inside. Everyone but Mitch had died. When the boy's commanding officer had contacted Bragg, he'd informed him the boy was in a bad way. Seeing as Bragg was all the family Mitch had, he'd accepted the promotion and transfer back to Austin. His family might be a fractured mess, but it was his family. Bragg didn't hold illusions of a Hallmark family reunion, but he had figured he'd get the boy on his feet before he returned to fieldwork on the border. However, he'd quickly learned nurturing a troubled kid fit him as well as politicking. Mitch's wounds from shell fragments had been easy enough to fix, but it was the post-traumatic stress disorder that had left invisible scars. The kid had nightmares constantly, and most were loud and violent. Mitch wasn't eating, and his drinking was becoming a real problem. Last night, Mitch hadn't come in the door until 4 a.m., and he'd been drunk. Bragg and Mitch had one hell of a fight, and Mitch would have left if Bragg hadn't taken his keys. "You're not my father!" The situation had to change soon for both their sakes. Bragg could track a killer to hell and back, but he couldn't find the words to soothe his nephew's grief. He shoved aside the unease and focused on the job. They won't be able to help him out of this mess. No amount of money is going to fix this. Bragg checked his phone, half hoping he'd gotten a message or call from Mitch. He'd received several calls from the office, but none from his nephew. After the pre-dawn blow-up, the boy had staggered to his room and fallen into bed. Bragg had left him, but now questioned that decision. Bragg feared the boy wouldn't make it to September at the rate he was withdrawing. "How's Mitch doing?" Winchester, a former Marine, punched the elevator button. Bragg never talked about his personal life. Ever. But this problem, like the weather, didn't give a shit about what Bragg wanted. "He's quiet? Doesn't talk much?" Winchester didn't speak for a moment. "You know my wife is a psychologist." "Yeah." "Joe would be glad to talk to him. She's good with people." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Getting Mitch to talk is like pulling teeth." "He needs to talk and get engaged. Being alone is the worst." "Is he drinking excessively?" He flexed his fingers. "Yeah." Mitch was Bragg's only family. His problem. His to fix. But he didn't have any ideas. The VA hooked him up with a support group at the local crisis center. It's run by volunteers and a guy named Stewart. Winchester kept his stance casual, his gaze ahead. "Is it helping?" They stepped onto the elevator. "I don't know. It's hard to get the boy to string more than 2 words together." Winchester grunted disapproval. "I can ask Joe about the group. If she doesn't know about it, she'll find out." Bragg rubbed the back of his neck and punched LL for lower level. Getting outside help went against Bragg's nature. "I'd appreciate that." Winchester texted the details to his wife. He hit send. Another text came back in seconds. He read it and nodded. "She says they're a good group. Dr. Stewart's well respected and good, she says. She's off to a meeting, but we'll dig up more information." "Great." The elevator doors opened. They stepped off and moved down the hallway toward a set of double doors and into the exam room. A foul odor greeted them and drew their attention to a stainless steel gurney holding a sheet-clad body. Another smaller table held a collection of instruments. A medical assistant, dressed in scrubs, pulled the sheet back. Next to the gurney stood Dr. Hank Watterson. In his mid-30s, Watterson stood tall, thin like a young poplar, in his green scrubs. A thick, dark mustache added interest to an average face. "Dr. Watterson?" Bragg said. The doctor glanced up from a sink where he lathered his hands with soap. Intelligent, sharp green eyes stared at them through horn-rimmed glasses. "So, you two are the reason I was called in on my day off?" Winchester grinned. "Sorry, Doc. No rest for the wicked." Dr. Watterson grunted. "Body arrived about a half hour ago, and I was just about to start the autopsy." Bragg didn't care much for the medical examiner's office. Cold and sterile, the buzz of fluorescent lights, it reminded him of the hospital where his mother died when he was 6. "Appreciate you getting right on this." "Sooner it's done, the sooner I can get out of here." Dr. Watterson nodded toward the surgical gowns. "This one is not going to be easy. Might as well suit up." Bragg and Winchester donned hospital gowns and stood back. The victim's clothes had been stripped and tagged, and his hands remained wrapped in paper bags, as they had been at the crime scene. Dr. Watterson studied the body's bloated belly. Rory Edwards's hands and feet were black with settled blood, and his head tilted to the left, as it had when he dangled from the rope. His arms and chest were covered with tattoos. A skull on fire, barbed wire through a heart on his arm, crosses, the letter E. Stripped, he looked leaner and malnourished. Fading track marks peppered the veins of his left and right arms. The doctor started with an external examination, noted the rope burns around the neck, and confirmed the victim also had ligature marks on his wrists. He went on to catalog rope marks, tattoos, and the absence of any other trauma. As he pressed a scalpel to make a Y incision in the victim's chest, Dr. Watterson said, "I hear the victim's brother's pretty rich and has a lot of connections." "He is," Bragg nodded, "which is why we wanted to be absolutely sure we've identified the right man before we made the death notification." Dr. Watterson kept his gaze on the body as he spoke. "No sense churning up a hornet's nest unless you have to." "About right." The technician removed the bags from the victim's hands, and Dr. Watterson, after a thorough inspection, scraped under the fingernails. If Rory had fought with his killer, the possibility existed that DNA remained under his fingernails. "I'll run a toxicology screen, but won't have the results back for a day or two. But judging by his teeth, he was malnourished and had one hell of a tooth infection. Left untreated, the tooth infection alone would have done him serious damage soon. My guess is he turned to meth in recent years." Dr. Watterson turned to a light box illuminating dental x-rays. "The bridge work and fillings belonging to Rory Edwards' dental records matches your victim." "This guy is Rory Edwards." "Yes, and I can confirm he did die of strangulation." "He was dangling from a tree," Winchester said. "You can never tell for sure until the exam." The doctor moved to the head of the table and pulled lighted magnifying lenses toward the dead man's neck. He studied the rope burns. "There is old scarring on his neck." Bragg frowned. "What kind?" The doctor was quiet for a moment. "Looks like an old rope burn. The current burn covers most of it up. Could have been easily missed. But it's there." He pointed to a small, faint white area ringing the victim's throat. "He hanged by his neck before." "Suicide attempt?" Winchester said. "Maybe. Asphyxiation games aren't uncommon in high-risk individuals, and this fellow is definitely high risk." Bragg leaned in and studied the faint white scar. "Crime scene didn't have the look of an erotic game, but who knows? How old are the scars?" Dr. Watterson shrugged. "Can't say, Bragg, but it's been years." Bragg thought about the image of the teenage couple nailed to the tree. It appeared Rory had been a happy kid. In fact, conjuring the picture, Bragg would have figured the girl with the moody, edgy glint in her eye was the troublemaker. Chapter 2. Monday, June 2, 3 p.m. Temperatures had slid into the triple digits when Bragg and Winchester arrived at the sleek glass tower located in the heart of Austin. A centerpiece in the city, the glass building glistened, but despite the heat, had a chilling effect. They moved through the revolving door and to the main reception desk. Bragg showed his Texas Ranger star to the heavy-set, gray-haired rent-a-cop behind the desk. "Texas Rangers for David Edwards." The request prompted confusion, but the guard picked up the sleek black phone and pressed a button from the dozens on his console. He passed on Bragg's request, listened, and then replaced the phone in the receiver. The guard stood and tucked in his shirt. "His office is on the 20th floor. The receptionist said you could come up, but she didn't promise access to Mr. Edwards." "Then I guess we'll have to take that up with her when we arrive." "Yes, sir." The Rangers made their way to the bank of elevators and punched the up arrow. The doors opened immediately, and the ride to the 20th floor was quick and as smooth as the building's glass exterior. When the door opened, there were more sets of glass doors, and beyond that, another receptionist. Etched in the doors was a large letter E. "Rory had an E tattooed on his body," Winchester said. "Odd a guy who spent his life avoiding the family would tattoo a memento of it on his chest." Bragg shook his head. "But then dealing with family doesn't go hand in hand with logic." Winchester pulled open the glass door and let Bragg walk in ahead of him. Bragg pushed back his coat so the thin blonde saw his star. "We need to see Mr. David Edwards." A cool, thin smile added brittleness to her otherwise flawless face. "He's in meetings." This is about his brother. "Rory?" She arched a brow. "What has he done this time?" "That's between Mr. Edwards and me, ma'am." He smiled, but a razor's edge sharpened the words. "I suggest you go ahead and let him know we're here, because he's going to be mighty mad later if he finds out through the media." Lips pursed, she rose and walked down the carpeted hallway and spoke to another administrative assistant positioned outside another office. "You've made a friend," Winchester said. "I have a talent." Winchester studied the modern reception area filled with lots of chrome and reflective surfaces. "Guy's a thing for the ice, so I noticed." The receptionist returned. "He will see you." A smile quirked the edge of Bragg's mouth. "Good." The receptionist passed them off to the administrative assistant, another cool blonde, who opened Edwards's door. The office, like the building, was all glass. The view of Austin was impressive, showcasing Congress Avenue all the way to the white dome of the state capitol. Edwards, a mid-sized lean man, had short dark hair, an olive complexion, and square jaw. He was dressed in a hand-tailored suit, white shirt, and a red tie. Gold cufflinks winked from his wrists. The family resemblance to the victim was evident. They shared the eye color and skin tone, but this man had a lean, sharp stare, contrasting the heavy-lidded gaze of Rory Edwards in his Texas Department of Motor Vehicles photo. Edwards came around his desk, moving with the confidence of a man in his domain. He didn't extend his hand. "I'm David Edwards." "Ranger Tec Bragg and Sergeant Brody Winchester, Texas Rangers," Bragg said. "We've got some bad news regarding your brother. Rory's gotten himself into enough trouble, but never enough to attract the Texas Rangers." His tone lacked worry or excitement, as if he'd spoken to the law enforcement about his brother many times before. "He has our attention now." A muscle pulsed in Edwards's jaw. "What's he done this time? And what do I need to do to make the problem go away?" Rory's rap sheet detailed dozens of petty crimes. Clearly, a guy like David wouldn't appreciate a brother like Rory. Bragg had gotten calls in the last months on Mitch. He'd smoothed out the minor messes, growing more frustrated with each new debacle. "He was murdered," Bragg said. David raised a brow. Again, no surprise registered, but perhaps a bit of resignation. Relief, even. "How?" Bragg had never figured Mitch would get himself into enough of a scrape to get himself murdered. But he'd feared car accidents and a half-dozen other tragedies when he'd been up late waiting on the boy. "He was hanged." Interest sparked brighter than shock. "Hanged? You're sure?" "We are," Bragg said. "I watched them cut him down this morning." Edwards rubbed the back of his neck with his hand. "It was a suicide?" "That's what the responding officer thought at first, but it appears he wasn't alone when he died." Edwards shook his head. "Rory ran with a bad crowd. Bunch of degenerates interested in their next score. I can imagine one of those clowns watching Rory hang himself and be too messed up or too apathetic to help. His hands had been bound behind his back." Edwards frowned. "He probably didn't have the stones to go through with it, so he got help." "Why would you think Rory would try to kill himself?" Bragg said. "Rory liked attention. He's pulled more than a couple of stupid stunts to get my attention." "Hell of a way to get it." "He was angry I cut him off," he sighed. "He called here about a week ago. Said he was clean and sober and said he wanted to make amends. Nothing I hadn't heard before. I'd tolerated him when our mother was alive, but after she died, I told him to clean up or go to hell." Winchester rested his hands on his hips. "And you think he staged this hanging to get your attention?" Anger deepened the lines on his brow. "Yes. He knows I want to run for public office. He wanted to embarrass me. But like every other scheme he hatched, he fucked it up. Like I said, he hooked up with a few clowns and they didn't have the sense to free him. He was found in a fairly remote area, Bragg said. A real bid for attention would be more public. I stopped trying to understand Rory a long, long time ago. Like I said, he didn't think through events and consequences too well. Do you know some of the guys he hung out with? Winchester said. Edwards squared his shoulders and turned from the Rangers to stare out the large glass windows. For a moment he didn't speak, but then turned and faced them. Dan and Spike are two names that come to mind because Rory was arrested with those two idiots about a year ago. I'd start with them. When is the last time you saw your brother? Bragg said. A year? The night the Austin cops arrested him with Spike. When he called me from jail begging for help, he threatened to call the media and tell the world what kind of family we came from. I went to see him. Told him our mother was dying. He was more worried about getting out of jail and getting his hands on a few bucks than he was her. So I called his bluff. Told him to contact the media. He never did. And he didn't come to our mother's funeral. What was your family like? Bragg asked. Not perfect, I will admit that. My father was driven, and my mother, well, she had trouble standing up to him. Not perfect, but also not the worst by far. But Rory would have found a way to make us sound like a terrible mess if he could make a buck. David flexed the fingers of his left hand. I haven't seen Rory since that night in jail. After his first phone call last week, I told my secretary not to put any more calls through. Anybody have a strong enough grudge against Rory to kill him? The person who hated Rory the most was Rory. He was never comfortable in his own skin. Believe me, he thought he could stage a stunt, and he managed to screw it up. Bragg pulled his cell from his belt and located the picture he'd snapped of the image nailed to the tree. This picture was found near your brother's body. Do you have an idea who the girl might be? The picture appears to have been taken at least a decade ago. David glanced at the picture and immediately his gaze narrowed. You said that picture was found near my brother's body? That's right. You know her? Yeah. He straightened as if he wanted to put distance between himself and the image. Her name was Elizabeth Templeton. Was? Might still be. That picture was taken 12 years ago. She dropped off the radar about that time, and I have no idea where she is, nor do I want to know. So why would the picture be nailed to your brother's hanging tree? David sighed. Rory and Elizabeth met when he was 19 and she was 16. He fancied himself in love with her and she in love with him. He wanted to marry her, and when my father laughed, he threatened to run away. But that didn't happen, of course. My father put an end to their plans. The E on Rory's chest didn't signify Edwards, but Elizabeth. How did Rory meet Elizabeth Templeton? David frowned. Is this really necessary? Rory hasn't seen Elizabeth in 12 years. No doubt he put the picture up to create drama. How do you know? Because several years ago I heard he'd been asking about her. He was trying to find her. I kept my cool for Mom's sake, but I wasn't happy. Rory stood to inherit a lot of money when he turned 32. Really? Dad would never have left him a dime, but Mom had a soft spot for her baby. I was able to convince her to put a time limit on the inheritance, hoping he'd grow up. Or die, Winchester said. Edwards's frown deepened. He didn't answer. And though Bragg could have pushed, he didn't want Edwards getting an attorney and throwing them out before his questions were answered. Why kill himself knowing he had money waiting for him in a year? Bragg said. A year was a lifetime to Rory. He could barely wait week to week. And you don't know where Elizabeth Templeton is today? Templeton. The name teased at a deep memory. No, and I don't care. As far as I was concerned, she was real trouble for Rory. It was her idea to run away. Rory wouldn't have had the spine to stand up to my father if it hadn't been for her. Bragg glanced at the image of the young girl's strained smile. He'd read her as troubled, but a manipulator? No. Hesitant, afraid, wounded, yes. But if he'd learned any lesson in his 10 years as a ranger, it was people had secrets. Where did the two meet? Bragg had doubled back to the question. This time, he'd get an answer. This is ancient history for my family. It's painful history, and I'd really rather not get into it. I'm not making polite conversation, Mr. Edwards. Steele now edged the words. How did the two meet? Edwards rested his hands on his hips and straightened his shoulders. He clearly chafed at orders. I'd like you to keep this confidential. I've done my best to keep Rory's issues out of the press. It's not good for business. The guy was used to power plays and winning. So was Bragg. I'm not making any promises. A moment's silence followed, and then David said, They met at Shady Grove Estates. It's a facility for troubled teens who need to recover from personal problems. Away from prying eyes. Winchester nodded. I've heard of the place. It's for high-risk kids who've attempted suicide. Very expensive. Not for your average kid. Cost an arm and a leg to send him there for the summer, but my parents did because they thought he really would get better. Better from what? Bragg's patience grew paper-thin. He was tired of playing games. Rory fell into drugs when he was about 16. We tried a lot of different therapies to get him on the right path, but no treatment worked. His habit grew worse and worse. And then he took a combination of drugs that really messed him up, and he tried to kill himself. That's when my parents put him in Shady Grove. Where is it? Northwest of Austin. Bragg rested his hands on his hips. How did he try to kill himself? Edwards shook his head. He hanged himself from the rafters in our horse barn. He apparently dangled for several seconds, but the rope broke and he fell to the ground. Our farm manager found him unconscious. That explained the scar the medical examiner had found. As Ranger Winchester just said, many of the kids at Shady Grove attempted suicide, Edwards said. Did Elizabeth Templeton make an attempt? Bragg asked. She did. She took sleeping pills and then cut her wrists. Bragg studied the image on his phone, wondering what drove this girl, his sister, anyone to give up instead of fighting. Given a choice, he'd always come out swinging. He shut off the phone and replaced it on the cradle on his belt. What can you tell me about Elizabeth Templeton? Again, the name tugged at him. She was a mess, David said. Terrible girl. Tumblers fell into place, and then a memory clicked. Wasn't Elizabeth Templeton involved in a car accident? Edwards nodded. Yes. Horrific accident. She was driving late at night. She swerved off the road and hit a tree. Her older brother and the brother's girlfriend were killed instantly. Elizabeth Templeton tried to kill herself after the accident? Bragg asked. The day she was released from the hospital, she took an overdose and cut her wrists. The family kept it quiet. They had enough grief, and she managed to heap on more. He drummed his fingers on his desk, his impatience and anger telegraphed with the strike of each finger. Highway Patrol figured she dozed at the wheel, swerved, and hit the tree. Brother and girlfriend were pissed drunk, but they didn't test Elizabeth's blood alcohol until later at the hospital. She was cleared of charges. Cops cleared her, but she didn't clear herself. Couldn't shake the guilt. That's why my parents didn't like her. A lot of baggage. You know a lot about her. A smile tweaked the edge of his lips. Good to know the threats to your family. You considered her a threat? I did then. And now? I haven't thought about her in over a dozen years. Winchester studied Edwards. But you said Rory was asking about her a while back. He was asking. I couldn't have cared less about her so long as she kept her hooks out of Rory. Elizabeth and Rory dated at Shady Grove. Yes. We weren't allowed any contact with him for the first 30 days he was in treatment. And then after that, we could only exchange letters. His first letter to us was dedicated to Elizabeth. He went on and on about how beautiful she was and how the accident wasn't her fault. Is that what she told him? She insisted another car ran her off the road. The cops didn't agree. He tugged at his cuff. I don't know. The girl killed her brother and another girl, so it stood to reason she was messed up. We didn't have a grievance against her, just didn't want her kind around. Her kind? Damaged goods. A muscle ticked in Bragg's jaw. Edwards could have been talking about Mitch. He didn't trust himself to speak. Winchester moved toward a wall of awards and photos. He studied them closely when he said, Sounds like you did a good bit of digging after that letter. Like I said, pays to know your enemies. Dad and I wanted Rory to get well, not get entangled with a very injured girl like Elizabeth. Rory had his share of troubles. I don't deny it, but he'd never have gotten better hanging around other damaged kids. He shook his head. If it had been one letter, we'd not have worried. But Rory kept talking about her, and then he sent the letter saying he and Elizabeth wanted to run away together. That's when you pulled him out, Bragg said. Yes. Dad and Mom told him it was time to leave Shady Grove. Rory was furious and refused to go. He said he was close to his friends and had promised never to leave them. But in the end, he had no choice. Any more contact with Elizabeth? She kept writing him letters. I intercepted them and told Rory she hadn't written. A couple of weeks after Rory came home, Elizabeth showed up on our doorstep. She asked him to run away with her. Rory wanted to go. Dad ordered him back to his room, and though Rory hesitated, he obeyed. Elizabeth fell off the radar right after. And what did Rory do after that? A month later, he ran away. He was 19, and there wasn't much any of us could do. We heard he tried to find Elizabeth, but she was gone by then. He begged Dad to hire detectives, but Dad refused. I can tell you her mother is still in Austin. She might know how to find her. Do you know how Elizabeth reacted to Rory's rejection? Winchester said. He'd picked up a round crystal award and handled it like it was a baseball. Edwards frowned. Don't know and don't care. She left, which was good enough for me. I'll ask her mother, Bragg said. She should know where her daughter is. My mother knew the Templeton family. After the accident, Mrs. Templeton would talk about Jeff, the son she lost, but she never mentioned Elizabeth. Elizabeth had made a terrible mistake as a teenager. She'd killed 2 people, and then tried to kill herself. As much as he disapproved of the girl's choice, a part of him pitied her. Some people, like his sister, were simply weak by nature. What he needed to figure was if her past losses drove her to now kill. Edwards rested his hands on his hips. Do you really think Elizabeth could be involved in this? It's been 12 years since the two saw each other. It's been 12 years as far as you know, Winchester offered as he set down the crystal award. You said you'd not seen Rory for a year. Edwards nodded. True. We'll be in touch in a day or two about your brother's remains. The medical examiner will likely release the body by the end of the week. David shook his head. There's no rush at this point. It's over for Rory. Neon lights blinked orange and red in the window of Mulligan's bar. Greer Templeton pushed through the front door, stopping as her eyes adjusted from the bright afternoon sun to the dim light of the bar. Music played from an old-style jukebox in the corner. There was a long pine bar to her left, backed by a mirrored wall and shelves full of liquor bottles. Every wooden stool around the bar was full of someone with a drink. She searched the faces of the men, her scrutiny catching the attention of several. One grinned and, taking his half-filled beer mug with him, pushed off the stool and walked toward her. He was a tall, burly, jean-clad guy with weathered features and shoulder-length gray hair. "You searching for me, little lady?" His gruff voice held a hint of humor. "I might be just what you need." Greer scanned the room, barely acknowledging the man. "Nope." "How do you know?" He didn't shy away from openly studying her. "I might be just right for you." Greer met his gaze. "You're not." The man's smile faded. "I could make you want me." "Doubtful." With a sharp glance, she dismissed him and the suggestive tone underlying his words. The man muttered an oath, but she didn't bother to turn around as she moved away. She didn't come into Austin during the day often and wasn't accustomed to the crowds, noise, or congestion. Each time she did venture into town, the population seemed to have doubled. She made her way through the dim pub toward the back. The guy she wanted was young, tall, and wide-shouldered with posture like a soldier. And if she didn't miss her guess, he had chosen the darkest, most secluded booth because it's what she would have chosen. She found him in the last booth, slumped over a half-eaten sandwich and staring into his beer. He was young. Barely over 20, he had dark hair, tanned skin, and a square jaw. He wore a dark t-shirt, jeans, and a thick watch on his left wrist. His face retained a boyish quality contradicting coiled tautness reminiscent of a spring ready to pop. Drawing in a breath, she questioned the sanity of her decision. She should leave well enough alone. Just walk away. Take care of number one. But a promise was a promise, and the sooner it was met, the faster she could retreat. Gritting her teeth, she slid into the opposite side of his booth. He glanced up, studied her, his gaze narrowing. "My name is Greer." Dark circles under his eyes told her he wasn't sleeping. And if she didn't miss her guess, eating was a chore, and he'd pulled away from everyone who tried to help. He amounted to a lot of work and trouble. Annoyed, he eased back against the back of the booth. He didn't want her here, likely wanted to tell her to shove off, but something in him kept him from being overtly rude. "You're Mitch." He swirled the straw a bit faster in the soda as a subtle anxiety rippled through him. "Maybe." She really did not want to do this. She did not want to reach out, connect, or have contact with this kid and the pain he carried. But she had a debt, and she paid her debts. She laid her palms on the table and stared at her deeply tanned hands before raising her gaze to him. "Mitch Bragg, right?" "If my uncle has sent you to talk to me, I'm not buying. I want to be left alone." Fatigue coated each word. She understood that kind of fatigue. It ran bone deep and demanded he crawl into bed and pull the blankets over his head. That had been her once, and it had taken her a year to shake the exhaustion. "I've never met your uncle, and I honestly don't care to." He arched a brow. "Who are you?" "Greer." "I don't know you." "I don't know you either." "Go away." "Believe me, I'd love to. In fact, nothing would make me happier right now." His scowl deepened. "Then go." She flattened her hands on the table. "I don't come into town much, and I'm not a fan of crowds. They make me irritable." I'm hoping to get out of here before it gets too busy." A hint of knowing flickered in his gaze as he studied her, taking in her long braided brown hair, weathered blue t-shirt, jeans, and the 2 silver bracelets hugging her left wrist. "Get to the point." Several loud patrons burst through the front of the pub. Their loud laughter echoed off the dark walls covered with hundreds of photographs. Soon, the place would be filling up, and she already itched to be in her truck driving out of town. "A friend asked me to talk to you. I don't like to talk." "Thank God." She didn't hide her relief. "I don't like to talk. So, we will keep this short." He studied her, confusion seeping through annoyance. "You aren't making sense." "I heard you needed a job. I need help. I run a vineyard outside of town." Amusement flickered behind the annoyance. "I don't know a single fact about wine." "I need a strong man who can work the land. I don't need experts. I've plenty of those. You'd be doing manual labor. You'll start with picking weeds." "Why me?" "Heard from a friend of a friend you could use a job, and seeing Memorial Day just passed, it makes sense to hire a vet." A bitter smile twisted the edge of his lips. "I'm your patriotic duty?" "Maybe. Does it matter?" "I don't know." She pulled a card from her back pocket. "This is my place, about 30 miles outside of Austin in the hill country. We're really not easy to find, so you'll have to be on the lookout for our sign. It's small. If you want the work, then come. If you want to sit in the dark and drink warm beer and eat shitty food, have at it. Makes no difference to me. I promised I'd offer you work, and I've kept my promise." In truth, she hoped he'd refuse. She didn't want the weight of his grief when she had enough of her own. "Who'd you promise?" "Dr. Stewart." "The doc that runs the group?" "Yeah." "How do you know him?" "We're on the board of the crisis center together. He was a good friend after my aunt died." He leaned back against the booth. "Why do you volunteer at the center?" "I thought you didn't like to talk." He shrugged. "My personal history is boring, and why I volunteer is even less interesting. You need a job, and I'm here. That's all that matters." Eyes narrowed as he studied her. "The job is yours if you want it, but you'll have to be at my place tomorrow at 9 sharp." He flicked the edge of the card with his index finger. "I'm getting disability benefits. I don't need money." "I've had a lot of money, and I've had none. There is more to life." He shook his head, his t-shirt shifted, and the top edge of a fresh tattoo peeked out from under his shirt sleeve. "Who are you?" "I told you, I'm Greer and I own a vineyard." He shook his head. "No way. You can't be more than 30. 28 to be exact, and I inherited it." She rubbed her hand over the silver bracelets on her wrist. "You want the job or not?" "I don't know you." "I don't know you, and I'm taking the bigger risk. But Dr. Stewart vouched for you. That's enough." "Why take a risk on me?" She tipped her head back, trying to quell her frustration. She wasn't so annoyed with him as herself. She had a million chores to do other than coaxing a wounded bird to safety. "Like I said, I owe a favor." "What kind of favor?" "None of your business." "Do you always find strangers and offer them work?" That made her smile. "Do you always ask so many questions?" "Yeah." The crowd in the bar grew louder, and without turning she knew more people had come into the place. The more people came in here, the greater the chance she'd be recognized, and she wasn't ready to answer questions about the past. "As much as I'd love to chat, like I said, I don't care for crowds or places like this. If you want the job, be at the vineyard tomorrow by 9. "This makes no sense." She shook her head as she rose. "No, I guess not. Don't hold your breath. I won't. You'd be doing me a favor by not coming. The uncensored honesty caught him off guard. You always mean? For a long, tense moment, she did not speak. Old feelings kicked and scratched her insides. You remind me of myself. He shook his head. We are nothing alike, lady. You can't pretend to know me. But I do, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I know what it's like to see loved ones die. I know what it's like to have others tell you the accident wasn't your fault, and to know deep in your heart it was. I know how to second guess and to wonder. If I'd been faster, quicker, or sharper. If it hadn't been dark or so late at night. I've lived with the ifs every day for the last 12 years. He paled as if he'd been punched in the gut, but he remained silent. I know what it's like to carry pain so heavy my knees wanted to buckle. Dropping his gaze, he cleared his throat before he met her steady stare. You plan to fix me? Greer shook her head. I'm no savior, and I can't say for sure if I'm fixed. But I can offer you a job that will work you so hard you'll collapse into bed at night. The job isn't glamorous, but it has purpose. A reason to get up in the morning and put one foot in front of the other. He tapped his thumb against the table, studying her. He didn't respond. Without asking, she could read his thoughts. Why would anyone want me? I'm worse than damaged goods. I'm a failure, a killer. In the darkest part of the night, when her brain wouldn't stop spinning despite an exhausted body, Greer still harbored those same thoughts about herself. 12 years, and the demons refused to leave her in peace. Take it or leave it. You're not doing me any favors either way. Her heart racing, she turned, dodged a couple of laughing guys, and moved toward the door. A bone-deep cold made her hands tremble, but certain Mitch was watching, she kept putting one foot in front of the other. Damn, she muttered as she pushed into the bright sunlight. She walked the half-block to her truck and slid behind the wheel. Her chilled body soaked up the warmth, and for a moment she merely sat. Finally, she dug her purse out from under the front seat, and from it fished out her cell phone. She dialed, and the phone rang 3 times. Did you do it? I did it. She glanced at the 2 silver bracelets on her wrist. I'm proud of you. Greer leaned into the seat, letting the hot leather burn into her skin. Physical pain was a tried and true distraction. Don't be, Dr. Stewart. I didn't issue the most welcoming invitation. He laughed. If you'd been nice, it probably wouldn't have worked. He's had his fill of nice. Well, then I'm the one for him because I don't have a drop left to give. It's going to be fine, Greer. This will work out for both of you. I'm not so sure. Why? Her voice hitched. He reminds me of my brother. Silence snaked through the line. Maybe that's a good thing. How? Wait and see. Greer fished out her keys and started the truck's engine. I'm pretty damn sure this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. A spotlight shone on the picture hanging above the desk. It was a happy picture. 5 teens, 2 boys and 3 girls, arms clasped, smiles bright. They were fresh-faced kids dressed casually. The clothes were carelessly wrinkled, splashed with water from the nearby lake, and smudged with dirt from the game of touch football finished mere moments before the picture was taken. A look beyond the wrinkles and the dirt revealed name-brand clothes costing hundreds and hundreds of dollars. One boy wore a family signet ring, and all the girls wore jewelry, not the department store knockoffs, but real gold and diamonds. But then only the most affluent families could afford Shady Grove Camp, nestled 30 miles northwest of Austin. "You are always studying that picture," she said. He kept his gaze on the image. Behind each of the smiling faces lurked wrenching pain. The boy with the signet ring had threatened to shoot himself. The girl with blonde hair and the peaches and cream complexion had taken an overdose. Another had tried to freeze herself. Another cut her wrists. So much agony. So many lost souls. They were a good group of kids. I never understood why you liked them so much. Because I understood them, their pain. Her laughter rumbled in his head. If anyone should know pain, it's me. He winced. Just stop talking. Why? I'm sick of your voice. More laughter. Tough. He traced the images of the young blonde girl, Elizabeth. You've been fixated on her from the beginning. Shut up. It's because she reminds you of me. Bullshit. She doesn't favor you. No, we didn't look alike, but she has my spirit. She's a fighter. Won't let go. He could deny her assessment, but he'd be lying. Maybe. They all have such pretty smiles. Shady Grove taught them to smile. Extra desserts, extra time in the craft center, extra phone calls home if they smiled. Shady Grove taught them all how to hide behind a smile. What are you thinking? She said. He didn't raise his gaze from the photo. It breaks my heart to know they're still so sad. That last night together when that picture was snapped, it was a perfect time. Yes. Not everyone is fooled by smiles, she said. Not everyone believes life is preferable to death. I don't. And they don't either. You see, I see. Now it's your job to take away their pain for good. They don't have to go on pretending any longer. No. Chapter 3. Monday, June 2, 5 p.m. A background check revealed Spike had been released from prison last year, but remained on parole for another 3 months. It took less than 15 minutes of calls to locate Spike's parole officer and get the address of the car wash where Spike worked as a buffer. Bragg pulled up at Chicken's Car Wash located off Exit 6 on Interstate 35. He pulled up in his SUV, paid $20 for a basic clean, and drove down into the washer. Water splashed on his windshield and then soap spattered. He sat back in his seat staring past the machines to the crew of men who waited with buffing rags to dry the car and wash the windows. He glanced at Spike's Texas State Prison System photo and then to the trio of waiting men. Black hair, short, a dragon tattoo on his right arm made it easy to spot Spike, who stood apart from the other two. Spike tapped his foot and glanced around as if wishing away the time so he could get on with his life. Spike had done time for forgery and embezzlement. There'd also been a drug charge, but the prosecutor had dropped it in exchange for the plea bargain on the other two crimes. No violent offenses, but he was the kind of guy you kept away from the till. The machines hummed and whirred and finally rinsed the last of the dirt from this morning's crime scene. He pulled up close to Spike, who spit once to his right, and then tugged the drying rag from his back pocket. Bragg watched as the guy dried the windshield. He studied his hands and face, searching for signs he'd been in a fight. The medical examiner had called minutes ago and said he had found skin under Rory's nails. Rory had scratched someone, likely his killer. Spike didn't appear to pay much attention to Bragg until he saw Bragg's white hat resting on the front seat. Worry flowed through Spike, but he kept drying. When Spike finished, Bragg got out of his car and pulled a $5 from his pocket. He held it out to Spike, who, eyes downcast, reached for the money. "Spike Anders?" Bragg said. Spike chewed his bottom lip as he quickly tucked the money in his pocket. Tell my parole officer I'm working hard, and I ain't been in any trouble. How do you know your parole officer sent me? You're a ranger. Last I checked, rangers don't make social calls to ex-cons. Point taken. I do have a couple of questions for you. Spike glanced over his shoulder as if assessing his exit strategy. Smiling, Bragg slid his hand to the gun resting on his hip. You're not in trouble, Spike. But if you run, we are going to have a real issue. And I don't want trouble. I want to get home to supper. Spike sniffed as he twisted the drying rag between his hands. I'm not going anywhere. Good. The car behind Bragg beeped, and he waved it toward another dryer. Spike sighed. You're costing me tip money, Ranger. Tell me about Rory Edwards, he said in no particular rush. The sound of the familiar name eased the stiffness in Spike's shoulders. I ain't seen Rory in about a week. Where's the last place you saw him? Here at the drive-thru. He came by to show me how good he was doing. Said he'd been sober for 200 days. Did you believe him? He looked good. For Rory, I mean. Clear-eyed and his hands didn't shake. He wanted to show his brother he had cleaned up his act. Said there was a woman, too, who he needed to make amends with. He say who the woman was? No, never gave a name. Rory ever visit his brother? I don't know. Rory's kind of afraid of his brother. His brother was good about bailing him out until about a year ago, and then all the help stopped. Why'd it stop? Their mom died. David told Rory he only helped him to keep the old lady happy. It troubled her Rory had turned out badly. To her dying breath, she prayed Rory would straighten out. He reached in his back pocket and pulled a crumbled cigarette packet and a book of matches. He lit a cigarette and puffed. Rory used his mom's guilt. Used it? He'd lean on his mother, who would go to David and make him cut Rory a check. This went on for years. Rory knew which buttons to push when it came to his mother. Rory wanted to find his brother and apologize. Where's Rory been the last year? Spike puffed on the cigarette. Up in Houston, a halfway house or something similar. Dr. Watterson had told Bragg Rory's body tested positive for high levels of alcohol and coke. I'd bet my last dollar Rory couldn't stay sober long. It was still a struggle. Rory liked being hammered too much. Spike glanced past Bragg and raised a hand. Be right back to work, boss. I'm talking to a Texas Ranger. Bragg turned and saw a thin guy with a clipboard scowling at them. He held up a hand as if to say he recognized he was interrupting, and then turned back to Spike. And you have no information on the woman he wanted to see? No idea. He wouldn't say. But he kept looking at an old picture. Bragg pulled out his cell phone and showed Spike the image nailed to the tree. That it? Spike leaned in. Kind of like it. Bragg replaced the phone. Back to the last time you saw Rory. He just said he weren't going to drink no more, and he'd gotten a line on a job. Seemed excited about it. What kind of job? He didn't know exactly. Said it was farm work. Said he looked forward to working with his hands. Where was the job? If he told me, I don't remember. I reminded him he owed me $100, and he said not to worry. He'd pay me back when he got his first paycheck. He didn't look sad or upset? No. The son of a bitch was on top of the world. Smoke trailed out of Spike's mouth and nose as he exhaled. What's he gotten himself into this time? Job turn out to be bogus? He get arrested for doing something he shouldn't? I told him good jobs didn't fall into the laps of guys like him. Bragg rested his hands on his hips. Rory died. Spike paused, cigarette at his lips. Rory's dead? He is. Spike took a deep drag. Dumb son of a bitch. Someone knife him or shoot him? He was hanging from a tree when I saw him this morning. Spike's eyes widened. Hanging? Like he was lynched? Someone strung him up. Tried to make it look like suicide. Shit. He piss anyone off lately? Rory pissed everyone off. He owed money to lots of people. Always made promises he couldn't keep. He was a taker. You ever hear anyone threaten him? No more than usual. Like I said, he could piss people off. I heard he also runs with a guy named Dan. Yeah, I met Dan. He's okay. Saw him a month ago. He was driving to Seattle for a job. He's a carpenter who does a lot of custom work. Said some computer bigwig was having shelves installed. Contractor needed extra help, so he called Dan. I think they went to school together. You've not seen Dan since? Not for weeks. Bragg pulled in a breath. Where was Rory living lately? Rented a room in East Austin, 5th Street. Don't remember the address, but there's a taco place on the first floor with a blue chili in the window. One of the last things I told Rory was he smelled like tacos. Anything else you can tell me that would help? No. He drew in a lungful of smoke. Is there going to be a funeral? Spike said. I don't have any details. His brother would know. Oh, I ain't going. Not worth the hassle. Figure Rory wouldn't have broken a sweat trying to make it to my funeral, so I isn't worried about his. Besides, I have to work. A horn honked behind them. The manager now flicked a pencil hard against his clipboard as if warning all he was losing patience. Spike tossed the cigarette on the ground and stubbed it out with his booted foot. Speaking of work, if I don't get back, the boss is going to blow a gasket. And if I don't keep this job, I'll lose my room at the halfway house. Bragg pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to Spike. Keep me in mind if you think of something, especially if you remember who might have hired Rory. Spike held the white card in calloused, dirty fingers before cramming it in his pocket. Sure, Ranger, sure. Bragg got in his car and pulled out of the parking lot and wound his way back to I-35. The hood of his car glistened, but smudges streaked his front windshield. He checked his phone for messages and, seeing none from Mitch, decided to swing by the house just in case. After he checked on Mitch, he'd find Rory's rented room. 15 minutes later, when he pulled into the driveway and saw Mitch's black truck, relief washed away the lingering concern. He worried more and more for the kid with each new day. He found Mitch sitting on the couch watching ESPN Classic. The game on television was from a decade ago, Detroit Lions versus the Dallas Cowboys. No doubt, the boy had watched it with his mother. Sue had loved football. Bragg tossed his hat on the entryway table. Guilt tugged at him. He and Mitch hadn't had much time together. Memorial Day should have been a day they'd celebrated, but Mitch barely spoke all day and refused food. No grilled hamburgers, no fried chicken, no fanfare to celebrate the day honoring soldiers like Mitch. Mitch had made terrible sacrifices he still couldn't voice, and Bragg didn't know how to coax the words from him. Let's say we go out and get a steak. There's a great place a few blocks from here. T-bone's an inch thick. He could call Winchester and have him cover the search of Rory's room. But as he figured a way to free himself, he braced for a no. Mitch didn't do much lately. Mitch's gaze lingered on the television a beat. Sure, I'm hungry. Well, damn. He was pretty sure he'd witnessed a miracle. Bragg thought about changing into comfortable jeans and a t-shirt, but didn't want to risk Mitch's changing his mind in the interim. Let's go. Mitch didn't have a word to say while they drove the 1.5 miles to the restaurant, but Bragg didn't mind. The kid had finally said yes, and they were going to share a meal. He pulled into the parking lot of the steakhouse. It was jam-packed, no doubt full of other families not up for cooking on a hot evening. Most nights Bragg ate alone and accepted the waits as par for the course, but with Mitch with him, he wanted the line to move quickly. He wanted them seated, breaking bread and maybe even talking. They moved into the crowded restaurant lobby. The place was packed with families. Not the kind of hangout most single men frequented, but he liked being around the chatting kids, harried mothers and fathers. It gave him a glimpse into normal family life, an experience he and Sue had never had growing up. Bragg walked up to the hostess. He'd seen her before. Sandy. A pretty little blonde, she wasn't much older than Mitch. Last month, she'd seated him one night when Mitch had refused dinner. Seeing his badge, she had asked him about a boyfriend who was giving her trouble. She'd wanted advice. She struck him as a good kid, and he'd figured he'd help. He'd scribbled the guy's name, made several calls, and found out he'd violated his parole. Long story short, the boyfriend was back in jail for another decade. "Sandy?" Bragg said. "Ranger Bragg." A broad smile brightened tired eyes. "Good to see you." "You too. My nephew's with me, and we're looking to eat. What's the wait?" She picked up 2 menus. Her smile turned sly. "Your reservation was for 6:30, and I've your table right over here." He grinned. "Thanks." She led them to a table in the back, seated them, and handed them menus. "Your waitress will be right up." "Appreciate it, Sandy." She tossed an admiring glance at Mitch, and then smiled at Bragg. "No problem." Mitch met her gaze. "Thanks." Her grin broadened, and she returned back to her station crowded with waiting families. Bragg scanned the menu. "The T-bone is good. Bread is great. It's all good. Order whatever you want." He nodded. "T-bone sounds good. Sure there isn't something else you might want? Don't order it on my account." He wanted to fix the pain the kid carried, but didn't know how. Best he could do now was offer him a great meal. "T-bone is fine." Bragg resisted the urge to challenge, and when the waitress came to the table, he ordered 2 steaks with all the fixings plus bread. He waited until she returned with their soda order before asking, "How'd your day go?" Mitch sipped on his soda straw. "Good." "What's good mean?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. After a moment's silence, he said, "Got offered a job today." That tiny bit of news had him sitting straighter and leaning forward. However, he did his best to curb his enthusiasm and the rapid-fire questions begging to be asked. "That's so. What's the job?" Before he could answer, the waitress appeared with hot rolls and butter. More hungry for information than the bread, he waited as the boy tore into his bread and took a couple of bites. Finally, Mitch said, "I'm not really sure. Farmhand, I think." Farmhand. It was a hard road to hoe working the land. He wanted his nephew to get an education and have the world open up to him. But that was the big picture. Right now he simply wanted the kid to talk, engage in life. Farmhand would suit fine. "You know about farms? Mom said Grandpa had you riding a tractor at 8. "Yeah, I know farms and ranches. Tough work, but there's a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day." Mitch grunted. "You'll be working the fields, managing a barn, what?" "Don't know. She just said to show up tomorrow at 9 and she'd put me to work." He wanted to know who was hiring Mitch and what plans this woman had for him. But he reminded himself Mitch wasn't a kid, and if he babied him, it likely would ruin what little they'd gain tonight. "How'd she hear about you?" "Remember that support group I tried a couple of times?" "Yeah." "She knows the guy that runs it. Said she owed him a favor." "And you're the favor?" The lack of details fueled his frustration, but he kept it to himself. "I guess." Mitch tore more bread and ate it. "You know where the farm is?" He pulled a card from his pocket and tossed it on the table. "She said it's about 30 miles west of Austin. Some kind of vineyard." Bragg picked up the card. "Vineyard?" He glanced at the vineyard's name. Bonneville Vineyards. Rory Edwards' crime scene had been located on the edge of a vineyard. His gaze slid to the name of the woman who'd contacted Mitch, Greer Templeton. For a moment, the sounds of the restaurant faded away, and there was only the thump, thump of his heart in his ears. His first thought was for Elizabeth Templeton, the woman in the picture. Templeton wasn't a common name, but not so uncommon that he didn't suspect a connection. The hair on the back of his neck rose. Bragg kept his voice steady. You know any facts about Greer Templeton? Pretty, dark hair, kind of skinny, not friendly. Dark hair, not blonde. He flicked the edge of the card with his index finger. What else do you know about her? She drives a truck, and she cuts to the chase. Habit sent the follow-up question back rapid fire. And she offered you the job as a favor? That's what she said. Bragg summoned another question but held back, as if Sue had laid a hand on his shoulder. The boy had said more in the last few minutes than in the last month. Go easy. He wanted to go easy. He did. But he'd been a ranger too long not to toy with his suspicions. The Templeton name had been attached to a murder investigation this morning. Though the girl in the picture did not match Mitch's description, it had been a dozen years, and people changed a lot. He'd not had much time today to dig into Elizabeth Templeton's accident, but it would be first on his agenda after dinner. Rory's apartment would keep until morning. Their waitress brought 2 more sodas and another basket stacked high with warm rolls. She told them that dinner would be right up before hurrying to another table. Bragg drank his second soda. He didn't want to discourage the boy, but at the same time wanted him to understand the lay of the land. Bragg eased back in his chair. Are you thinking about taking the job? Mitch grabbed a roll, tore it, and watched the steam rise. Don't know. As frustrating as pulling teeth. Did she talk about pay? No. He reached for bread. Had a murder investigation this morning? Don't need to get into a lot of details, but an Elizabeth Templeton's name came up. Mitch glanced up from his soda, his gaze showing a spark of interest. She kill someone? No. At least I don't think so. He wanted to tell him about the picture, but hesitated. It was a detail in an active murder investigation. Wanted you to know, seeing as a Templeton offered you a job. Kind of a stretch, don't you think? Maybe. But it's my job to connect dots no one else notices. Mitch nodded as if mulling what Bragg had told him. Maybe I'll ride out there tomorrow, see what she has to offer. Their waitress brought 2 large steaming plates, each sporting a T-bone and a baked potato with generous sides of butter and sour cream. No green vegetables, because it was a shame to serve what neither would eat. Bragg was about to ask him to wait on the job until he could poke around in the woman's background when the boy glanced at his steak, picked up his fork and knife, and cut a large bite. He ate the piece, and then another, and then another. Strain banding Bragg's lower back eased a notch. Whoever the hell Greer Templeton was, she had made an impact on this kid, which for now appeared to be for the better. As much as he wanted to tell Mitch to stay clear, he held back. Later, he'd do a little digging. Dinner ended with slices of apple pie with heaping scoops of vanilla ice cream. Mitch hadn't said much more during dinner, but he'd eaten his entire meal and the pie. Some might view eating a meal as a baby step, but as far as Bragg was concerned, it was the first sign of life he'd seen in the boy since he'd returned home. They arrived home right at 9. Mitch thanked him for the meal, another first, and headed straight to his room. While a pot of coffee brewed, Bragg changed into jeans and a faded Texas A&M t-shirt. Then, coffee in hand, he settled in front of his laptop and clicked it on. He searched Bonneville Vineyards. Immediately, the Vineyards website popped up. It featured rolling land and rows of thick grapevines stretching toward the setting sun on the horizon. Another picture showcased a group of smiling people, wine glasses in hand around a table. An older woman with long graying hair smiled and laughed with them. The caption underneath read, "Bonneville Vineyard owner Lydia Bonneville greets guests at spring tasting." Bragg clicked through more images, read some of the site's blog entries, and on the events page, news of an upcoming fundraiser for the Crisis Center. Though he dug through the entire site, he found no telling tidbit about the woman who'd offered his nephew a job today. Sipping his coffee, he searched Greer Templeton. No hits came up. On the Crisis Center site, there was a mention of her 6 months ago when she'd joined the board. The blurb also mentioned she'd been volunteering at the center for the last decade. There was also a piece about a fundraiser this Wednesday at the vineyard, but no picture of Greer Templeton. None of this sat well in his gut. None of it. The Templeton name was associated with a murder investigation and a Templeton meets Mitch, and Rory Edwards's body had been found at a vineyard near Bonneville. Coincidence did happen, but not often by his way of thinking. Shit. Yeah, he'd be driving out to Bonneville Vineyards first thing in the morning. Bragg glanced at the clock. It wasn't 10 yet, and he had time to get by Rory's room. Refilling his mug, he changed, retrieved his gun, badge, and hat. A quick check into Mitch's room found him sleeping. He left as quickly as he could. The drive to Rory's took 15 minutes, long enough to finish the coffee and summon a second bolt of energy. He was accustomed to going long stretches without sleep, and tonight he'd get little. It didn't take much time to spot the Mexican restaurant with the blue chili in the window. Inside, he was greeted by a dimly lit interior and the blend of recorded guitar and trumpet music. Small, round tables with patrons filled the room, and in the back, a bartender poured shots of tequila. Colored lights draped the walls alongside pictures of Mexico. Bragg stopped at the register, where a short, stocky man with thick black hair and mocha skin stared up at him. The man wore a brightly colored shirt and a silver chain around his neck. "You here for dinner?" "I'm with the Texas Rangers. I'm here to search Rory Edwards' room." He showed the man his badge. "I've been told he's renting a room upstairs." The man glanced at the badge and back up at Bragg. "I don't want trouble." "I don't want any. Just want to have a look at his room." "Second door on the right." He fumbled in his pocket for a ring of keys, slid one free, and handed it to Bragg. "I don't want trouble." "Appreciate it." Bragg took the key. "Rory get many visitors to his room?" "I don't know. I don't ask. Long as they pay, I don't ask." "No commotion, no trouble." "He paid his first week in cash, and the second week wasn't due until Wednesday. Good enough for me." Bragg followed the stairs behind the register up to a hallway lit by a single flickering bulb. There were 4 doors on the hallway. He unlocked the second on the right and flipped on the light. The room was small, not more than 8 by 8, and it was filthy. Soiled, rumpled sheets covered the bed, and dozens of empty food cartons littered the floor. A mouse scurried under the bed. A pile of dirty clothes was mounded at the foot of the bed beside a pair of expensive cowboy boots. The boots were nice, but not as nice as the ones found on Rory's body. Wherever Rory had thought he was going, he'd dressed up for the occasion. In a small closet, he found a couple of jackets and a muddy pair of boots. He was on the verge of closing the door when he spotted the box on the floor. He picked it up and opened it. Inside were dozens of pictures of a woman. At first glance, he didn't recognize her, but closer inspection identified her. Elizabeth Templeton. All the photographs appeared to have been taken not 12 years ago, but recently. Elizabeth standing on the front porch of a ranch house. Elizabeth surrounded by long rows of grapevines, driving a red pickup truck, leaving a store. Rory had been keeping close tabs on Elizabeth. Her face had leaned out in the last 12 years, and her hair had gone from blonde to dark brown. But her figure was still slight. In most of the images, she was frowning, and he remembered what Mitch had said about the woman who'd hired him. Dark hair, not nice. Frowning, Bragg retrieved his phone and snapped pictures of the images before setting them aside to continue his search. He found a small, careworn Bible and a stack of note cards with handwritten affirmations. Do it. One step at a time. Believe. However, no strings to connect Rory to Elizabeth. Bragg descended the stairs and found the manager. He showed the man his phone sporting an image of Elizabeth. You ever seen her here? I don't ask questions. Yeah, I know, as long as they pay. Look real close, partner. Look real close, because if I find out you've seen her, you're going to get some real trouble from me. The man glanced at the picture and shook his head. Never seen her. You sure? Never seen her. Besides, she's too pretty for Rory. He thought he was sober for good and better than everybody, but he hadn't changed. No good. Barely had enough for a week's rent. I was figuring he'd not show tomorrow with the rent, and I'd have to toss him out. He have any visitors? No. Kept to himself. Heard him on his cell phone once or twice, but I never made out what he was saying. There'd been no cell in Rory's belongings. Bragg pulled a card from his front shirt pocket. You call me if you hear anyone talking about Rory. Where is he? Is he coming back? No, sir. He is not coming back. The man muttered an oath in Spanish. What about his room? I'm calling a forensic team now to dust it for prints. The man smoothed agitated fingers over oiled black hair. Are you going to stay here and wait for them? Yes, sir, I am. That a problem? The man's frown deepened. You are bad for business. Bragg grinned. I've been called worse. He returned to Rory's room and called in a team. As he waited, he sifted through each picture of Elizabeth. Beautiful, striking, but stern and solemn. He sensed life hadn't much eased the burden of her tragedy. What the hell was going on between you and Rory? Chapter 4. Tuesday, June 3, 6:30 a.m. Bragg left Austin before the morning tangles on I-35 South. He also wanted to arrive early at Bonneville Vineyards, not only to meet with the woman who'd offered Mitch a job, but the woman who owned the land near his crime scene. Even if she didn't have a connection to the case, he wanted to meet her and find out how she'd found Mitch. Remembering yesterday's route to the crime scene, he took the rural route exit off of the interstate and followed it another 20 miles before his GPS directed him over more back roads familiar to him. There were no directional signs to guide people to the vineyard, suggesting visitors weren't welcome. An unpaved gravel ribbon of road wandered alongside a barbed wire fence corralling row after row of vines bursting with a thick canopy of green leaves, sheltering plump grapes clinging to well-maintained trellises. In the distance, the sun rose above the horizon, casting a warm glow over the hills. The entire area was lush and green, and all he could think about was what it cost the family in water bills. Drought had been a problem in central Texas the last couple of years, and signs were the hard times weren't letting up anytime soon. Hard to believe Rory Edwards had been strung up right over the hill to his left. Around the bend, a ranch house came into view. Complete with a wide front porch, its original windows and a tin roof hinted of 19th century cowboys. However, the ranch's porch now sported potted lavender, rocking chairs, and a sign on the front porch read, "Private," and directed visitors to a larger stone building where the road dead-ended. Near the house stood a small barn painted with fading, chipped red paint and a small corral. The larger one-story main building just beyond was made of stone and glass, and though it had the air of new construction, was styled like a medieval European keep. But unlike a fortress, it didn't dominate the land, but hugged it, as if the designer wanted a seamless connection between structure and terrain. Small succulents floated in beds filled with earth-toned landscaping stones to add interest. However, it was the yellow and white wildflowers in brightly colored clay pots and a turquoise front door that rescued the place from being bland. To the right, a stone patio outfitted with wrought iron furniture overlooked vineyards that would catch the setting sun. Beyond the main building, the land had been cleared for more construction. Again, he gave credit to the site manager. He wasn't a wine drinker, but the place might have lured him in for a look if there'd been signs along the road to coax and welcome. He pulled up behind an older dark truck with a bed filled with tables and chairs. Grabbing his white Stetson from the passenger seat, he settled it on his head and eased out of the Bronco. In the distance, a dog barked. Resting his hand on the hip close to his gun, he surveyed the area. As he approached the building, a woman pushed through the glass doors of the main entrance. She wasn't tall, barely standing over 5 feet, but she held her shoulders back and her clear blue eyes cut. Not more than 30, she had gently tanned, smooth skin that accentuated a high slash of cheekbones. She wore her light brown hair in a braid that brushed slender shoulders, a white Bonneville Vineyards t-shirt billowing over full breasts and tucked into faded work jeans hugging gently rounded hips. Her boots were dusty, well-worn. "Can I help you?" Her voice had a rusty, whiskey quality, giving this wholesome farm girl a seductiveness enjoyed by older, more sophisticated women. Elizabeth Templeton. She was a far cry from the girl in the old image or the pictures Rory had taken. The last dozen years had thinned her frame and face, adding maturity and an appealing naturalness. But Rory's images had gotten her all wrong. What he'd taken for as anger and bitterness in the photos, in person, appeared to be a fascinating intensity. He suspected this woman did no job halfway. "I'm with the Texas Rangers." Elizabeth cocked her head, studying him closely, as if sensing this place wasn't his kind of place. However, even as her gaze catalogued his large frame and the scar on his face, she showed no fear. "How can I help you?" He managed a smile. "You Elizabeth Templeton?" Mention of her name triggered waves of tension that straightened her spine and narrowed her eyes. Hesitation flickered as if she seemed to toy with a lie. "That's right, but I go by my middle name now, Greer." Elizabeth Greer Templeton. Greer. The woman who'd offered his boy a job. Sergeant Tec Bragg. She took an involuntary step back before stopping. "Bragg, you're kin to Mitch Bragg?" He nodded. "He's my nephew." She drew in a breath as if bracing. "What can I do for you?" "I hear you've offered Mitch a job." "I have." "Doing what?" She held his gaze and took a step toward him. "General farmhand." "He doesn't have experience as a farmhand." Her lips flattened. "He already told me." "Then why hire him?" A line furrowed her brow. "Did he send you up here? Is he not coming today?" "As of last night, he was planning to be here." She nodded as if understanding flickered. "And you've come to check the place out." "Not the place. You." Her eyes sharpened. "You did a search on the vineyard, my name popped up, and you did a search on me and the alarm bells went off." "Why would they?" Her sigh sounded weary. "You came looking for Elizabeth. I've not used that name in 12 years, so let's not pretend. I've a full day ahead of me and don't have time for games. Ask direct questions, then I'll answer them. You don't want your nephew working for me, then have a conversation with him. But from where I stand, Mitch is 21, a man who can take care of himself and doesn't need his uncle running interference." Temper scraped along his insides. "How did you find Mitch?" "I found him. If you want more details, talk to him." "Not good enough." Fire sparked in her blue gaze. Well, it's going to have to be because I don't have to share my reasons with you or anyone. I offered him a job, he took it, end of story. Dr. Stewart arranged this? He tossed out the doctor's name, searching for a reaction. Mention of the man's name triggered flickers of recognition in her gaze. Ask him your questions. Again, my reasons are my own and none of your business. Now, if you will excuse me, Ranger Bragg, I'm expecting a delivery any minute. He tapped an impatient finger against his gun belt as he struggled with his words. His temper prowled inside him like a mountain lion, anxious to be unleashed. Mitch has had it rough. Taut muscles in her jaw softened a fraction. I know. Watch your step with my boy. He wrapped the words in threat and menace. Her shoulders stiffened as if he'd insulted her. If that's all you got, I've work waiting. Her annoyance didn't deter him. In fact, it drew him. Got one more question for you, Ms. Templeton. She glared at him now, a brow arched and a hand on her hip. Shoot. He studied her expression closely. I investigated a murder bordering your land yesterday. A hint of remorse darkened her gaze. I heard about that. Some fellow hanged himself. And then, as if to head off his next question, a cruiser came by yesterday and spoke to my farm manager while I was in town. I'm supposed to call him back, but haven't gotten to it. You hear anything else? No. I don't have time for gossip and news. So if you're here to ask me about the dead person, I'm afraid I can't do much for you. I spend most of my days here working. I don't venture out much. And yet you made your way into town yesterday to talk to my boy. I think you might know the victim. Could be, but I only know a handful of people in the area. He studied her face closely. The victim's name was Rory Edwards. Irritation gave way to surprise. Pursing her lips, she drew in a deep breath, letting it out so slowly he barely saw her move. Is this some kind of trick? Are you trying to prod information out of me because I hired your nephew? No trick. The medical examiner confirmed the identity of the body yesterday. She folded her arms over her chest. I've not seen Rory in a long time, at least 12 years. You've had no contact with him in this time? Her lips pursed. I had a message on my voicemail a week ago. The caller said he was coming to see me. He was an old friend. I did not return the call. Why not? Blue eyes clouded before sharpening. Some matters are better left in the past. I get the impression he still cared about you after all this time. She shook her head. I have no idea. I searched his room last night. He had a box full of recent pictures of you. Her face paled. I don't know about that. Can I ask how you two met? The grip on her biceps tightened. I get the sense you already know. Apprehension rolled off her and all but slammed into Bragg. Rory Edwards and her past were sore subjects. Answer the question. She glanced around as if making sure no one was around. We met when we were teenagers. We were both in a clinic for troubled teens. You both tried to kill yourself. The lines in her forehead deepened. I'm not proud of that time, but what does it have to do with Rory's death? Like I said, I haven't seen him in a dozen years. Bragg unclipped his phone and scrolled to the picture he'd taken of the photo found at the crime scene. He held out the phone, coaxing her closer toward him. You remember this picture? She didn't approach right away, but then moved closer. The soft scent of soap rose up around her. No flowery perfumes or exotic scents, but simply clean soap. His body tightened, unmindful of logic or reason. For a long moment, she didn't say a word, and then she cleared her voice. It was taken the last night we were both at camp. Rory left the next morning. How'd he end up with the picture if he left? I sent him a copy from camp. I didn't want him to forget me. His brother said you wrote to him several times a week, but Rory's father threw out the letters. Her jaw tensed, and he suspected an old wound opened. I guess one letter made it through. Rory never forgot you. She stepped back. I wish he had. Why's that? Really, do you have to ask? It was a painful time, and I've done my best over the last 12 years to forget about it. He locked his phone and tucked it back in its cradle. Were you really able to forget? She cleared her throat. Rory's family did us a favor by keeping us apart. But the rest? No, I have not forgotten that I wrecked a car and killed my brother and his girlfriend. I ruined so many lives. I carry that with me every day. That why you tried to kill yourself? A darkening in her gaze told him his words struck their mark. The months after the accident were a painful time. My parents' marriage fell apart, and my mother ate tranquilizers like candy. I saw it as my fault. When you're 16, life is black and white. I thought it was better for everyone if I left. She raised her hand to brush back her hair. The silver bracelets jangled, and for a faint second he saw the pale lines marking where she'd cut into her wrists. Were you drunk the night of the accident? She swallowed. I'll give you credit, Ranger. You ask the questions most people think or talk about behind my back. Had you been drinking? The police cleared me. He'd been fishing for a yes or a no, and he suspected she evaded an answer to annoy him. And your family had a really damn good lawyer. Were you drunk? No, I didn't have one drink that night. That's why my brother asked me to drive. My crime was that I'd had my learner's permit a matter of days, had no experience, and didn't have the sense to tell Jeff no. When did you see the other car had switched into your lane? Her head cocked. The cops didn't believe there was a second car. Humor me. When did you see it? She hesitated as if weighing each word. I don't know. Not soon enough. Radio blaring, brother and girlfriend laughing? I think so, she whispered. Lots of distractions. Greer closed her eyes and nodded. For an instant, she grew still and calm as if drawn back to another place and time. For a moment, she didn't speak. He watched her closely, and to his surprise, pity mingled with his suspicions. When she met his gaze again, anger had sharpened her blue irises into sapphire shards. I'm sorry Rory killed himself. I am. No one deserves to carry that kind of pain. No one. But I won't stand here and rehash the past. I won't. And when did you say you saw Rory last? He repeated questions often. Questioning someone involved in a murder investigation was like a fishing expedition. Sometimes tossing the same bait in the water garnered better results the second time. Police work and fishing were often about patience. I haven't seen him in a long time, and I really can't help you. Elizabeth Greer Templeton was a hard one to read. She said all the right words and hadn't triggered any alarm bells. But the best liars spun the best tales. Bragg realized pushing Greer could ruin the job for Mitch. But he had to push, not just for Rory's sake, but especially for Mitch's. If she was unstable in any way, he needed to know it. He studied her face closely. I don't believe Rory killed himself. Her head cocked. He wasn't the man hanging from the tree? Oh, he was strung up from the tree all right. Hell, he was a sight to see. Hell of a mess. Graphic details shocked, tossed people off balance, and triggered unexpected reactions. Her lips flattened, but she kept silent. I don't think there is a way a man could have secured the rope, shimmied up the tree, and then hung himself. If he'd jumped with the rope around his neck, it would have just about snapped his head off. The rope did slice into his neck, but the marks cut like a man dangling versus falling. And the purpose of that graphic description was meant to do what? No missing the pop of annoyance. He wasn't ready to talk about the cigarette butt or the tire tracks, though he did note the flatbed truck behind her. Shifting gears, he said, "What have you been doing all these years, Miss Templeton? You sure haven't been in the news at all." "I lived here. I earned several certificates in viticulture and summer courses in California. When my aunt died last winter, I took over the place." "You've changed your name, and you keep a low profile. What are you hiding from?" "I'm not hiding. I needed a fresh start after the accident. I didn't want to be with people who suffered loss and pain because of me. I have no intention of reconnecting with my past or the people I'd known a dozen years ago." "Then why not leave? Your aunt is dead." He nodded toward the new construction. "Looks like you're putting down roots." "It was my aunt's dream to make wine, and so we cleared ground for a winery and tasting room this past winter. She'd been suffering from cancer, but we thought she had it licked, and clearing the land was our way of celebrating." Her voice hitched. "And then she suffered an unexpected heart attack at the hospital during routine tests and died." "Again, why stay here?" "This is my home. Bonneville is as much a part of me as I am of it." "What do you do here?" She arched a brow. "You want a rundown?" "I'd also like a tour of the place." "You'll have to come back another time for the tour, Ranger Bragg. I have a horse farrier arriving in about 5 minutes." With or without an excuse, he'd return to Bonneville. "That's 5 minutes for a quick overview." She shook her head. "Tell me what you're looking for and I'll show it to you. You want to listen to my phone messages in case Rory called me more than I admitted? Want to check my boots for dirt or look in the barn for rope?" He smiled. "We'll keep it simple today. Tell me about Bonneville." Her lips flattened. "The new tasting room is behind me, but it's not furnished yet and there's little to see. The winery won't be finished until December." "Show me all your trucks." She cocked a brow but didn't miss a beat. "You see the one there? It's 10 years old. I use it for general transportation. I've 3 other trucks, but they're out with the morning crew who are weeding. They break at lunch. If you come back at noon, I can arrange a viewing." Pushy and hard-edged, she didn't resemble the kid in the photograph. Hard not to have sympathy for that kid. However, the woman was a ball-buster. In no rush, he walked over to the dark pickup, and using his phone, he photographed each tire. "What if I want the trucks brought in earlier?" Her gaze narrowed, and he sensed she was gauging if this was worth a fight. "It'll cost me money to bring in the crew and have them sit while you do whatever it is you do. The crew will be in at noon. I run on a tight budget, Ranger Bragg." He didn't care about her bottom line or her crew, but before he could rebut, a truck pulling a large horse trailer rolled up the hill toward them. Dust billowed around the wheels and coated the already grimy truck with more grime. Greer shot him a glance. "Give me a minute." "Sure." She tossed him a wary gaze and headed for the truck. There was no middle ground for Greer Templeton. Hot or cold, sad or angry. She acted stunned by the news of Rory's death, but then she could be one hell of a guilty-as-sin actress.